Hey folks, Randy Newberg here. We are going to teach you how to find elk. We're doing a 4-part video series about how you find elk every day. Because the number one reason that people don't fill an elk tag is because they don't consistently find elk. So we're going to cover how to find elk when it comes to cow elk, and then we're going to do bulls in October, September. Let's start with September, October, November. And the crew says I have to do these in 3 minutes. So I better get started if I'm going to tell you how to find cow elk every day. Everything in here is in way more detail out at outdoorclass.com. There you can find all kinds of videos plus the University of Elk Hunting. Go to outdoorclass.com, use promo code RANDY, and you'll save a bunch of money. So let's talk about cow elk. The reason we're starting with cow elk is because cow elk are what attracts bulls in September, because it's the rut. Even though it's a feeding period, it's really food patterns. You're looking for cow elk. So we're going to start there, because if you find the cow elk, you're going to find the bulls in September. Cow elk have 3 daily activities, right? Most of it is eating, some of it is sleeping and bedding, and the rest of it is watering or moving back and forth among those 3 activities. You want to put yourself where those 3 activities are happening on that day, at that time, when you're out hunting. We're going to talk about the first one, eating. The reason we start there is cow elk just focus on food. That's their daily priority. The best food on the landscape with the least amount of expenditure and the lowest risk to do it. So think forage, forage, forage when you're trying to find cow elk. Elk are grazers. So that means forbs and grasses. The forbs are mostly gone and dried up by the time we get to September. So that means you're probably looking for grasses. The most abundant forage out there, and they can acquire it in the greatest quantity with the least risk and the lowest expenditure. Little caveat, in the Southwest states, sometimes they'll also focus on Gambel's oak, aspen, and mahogany. How do you know which grass the elk want on the day that you're out hunting? Google's your friend. Specifically, Google Scholar. Forage studies have been done on every elk herd from universities, state game agencies, federal agencies, any agency that issues a public land grazing permit. All that stuff is out there. It will tell you what forage elk prefer at that time of year. So now we say, you're looking for grasses. Where do you find these grasses? Well, generally, there's going to be 2 factors that determine where the forage and the grasses grow. Canopy disruptions and moisture. Canopy disruptions are usually fire, beetle kill, logging, anything that breaks up the forest canopy. Easy to find those on maps. When we're talking moisture, dry areas especially, we're looking for slopes with the least amount of sun exposure, because the grasses are going to stay lush later into the year with less sun exposure. Those are usually northeast, northwest. Sometimes they can be east slopes, but could also be down in a canyon or way up on the mountainside. It doesn't take too much topography, even in foothill country, to create a north-oriented slope that's going to be moister and have better forage. Activity number 2 is sleep, which means you're focusing on bedding areas. Bedding areas will be a slope of less than 20 degrees, preferably less than 10 degrees. And it's going to be in the top 1/4 to 1/3 of a main ridge or a secondary ridge, with the wind at their favor. Preferred bedding areas also help them with thermal regulation. They're trying to stay cool, especially in September when it's hot. Think about northeast, northwest, straight north slope exposures. Now in cold weather, if you're hunting cows, think about warmer slopes. They're probably going to be the southwest, the southeast. On really cold days, maybe even the straight south stuff. Cow elk prefer to be undisturbed. They'll tolerate a little more disturbance than bulls, but most studies show that elk will prefer to bed a mile from roads and trails. Activity number 3, drinking, getting something to drink, water. Cow elk will usually water once a day, usually early in the morning or late in the afternoon. In northern latitudes, there's water in every drainage. So it's hard to use water as a congregation factor. You get in the arid climates, these scarce areas, that's where you're going to see some cow elk. They're usually going to be within 2 miles of their preferred water source, never more than 5 miles. That is a congregation for cow elk. So there you have it. To find cow elk, focus on these daily activities in this order of importance: forage, sleeping and bedding, drinking, and water. Mark those spots on your map, and you'll know where these activities are happening, and you'll see the pattern of how elk should probably be moving, and those will tell you the locations where you should set up to find cow elk. On as many of those spots as you can, and you're going to consistently find cow elk, and you're going to consistently fill your cow elk tag. Hope that helps. Stay tuned, because the next video we're going to go to finding bull elk in September.